Imagine walking through an ultra-exclusive neighborhood of gorgeous modern mansions, places where iron gates and manicured hedges used to signal untouchable, permanent wealth. But today, the view is different. Foreclosure signs are crudely taped to custom-built mahogany doors, and moving trucks are blocking the driveways. Not because these multimillionaires are upgrading, but because they are fleeing. The luxury real estate market is facing an absolute unmitigated bloodbath right now in 2026. Properties that were once fought over in frantic bidding wars are bleeding 30, 50, even 65% of their paper value. This isn't a minor market correction. It is a brutal financial nightmare trapping high net worth buyers and supposedly sophisticated investors in a vice grip of their own making. What we are witnessing is the ultimate collective hangover from the pandemic buying frenzy. For a few wild years, historically cheap money and a sudden panic to escape major cities blinded everyone to the basic fundamentals of economic gravity. People bought eight-figure estates sight unseen, waived structural inspections, and treated residential real estate like speculative tech stocks. They assumed the line on the chart would point upward forever. But gravity always wins, mopping out the top 10 cities across the United States, where these high-end homes are turning into massive financial anchors, is absolutely crucial before you even think about packing your bags, liquidating your portfolio, or planning your next cross-country relocation. Understanding the hidden mechanics behind this unprecedented meltdown is the only way to protect your capital. For cash-heavy buyers, this crisis is a rare window of leverage, but only if you know how to read the warning signs. If you don't, you are simply catching a falling knife that will slice clean through your balance sheet. The root or cause of this crash is far more complex than just high interest rates. That is the lazy explanation. The real rot is much more structural and insidious. We are talking about the sudden, terrifying rise of uninsurable zip codes, where major carriers have quietly packed up and abandoned entire states. We are talking about massive tech sector layoffs that have suddenly turned highly compensated executives into anxious job hunters overnight. And we are looking at local tax policies that are actively punishing anyone who owns a premium piece of land, turning the dream of property ownership into a relentless liability. There is an undeniable, bitter sense of irony in seeing these ultra-modern, sprawling smart homes sitting completely dark and empty, while developers desperately try to slash prices just to break even on their construction loans. The wealth is simply vaporizing. And at the very end of this road trip, we are going to look at one specific coastal haven where multi-million-dollar estates are practically being given away because of a bizarre, highly localized zoning crisis that absolutely nobody saw coming. It is an administrative trap that has completely obliterated generational wealth overnight, proving that even the most exclusive dirt on earth can become worthless if the local bureaucracy decides to turn against you. Getting ahead of these localized crashes is the only way to protect your hard-earned equity in this chaotic, unforgiving market. It requires ignoring the glossy marketing brochures and looking directly at the hard carrying costs. Because the ultimate lesson of 2026 is simple. A gorgeous mansion is only an asset if someone else is willing and able to buy it from you. When the music stops and the pool of qualified buyers evaporates, that beautiful glass house quickly becomes a very expensive, very beautiful prison. Let us hit the highway and witness the greatest destruction of private wealth in modern American real estate history, starting with the markets where the hype was loudest and the crash is proving to be the most unforgiving. The catastrophic devaluation of high-end American real estate in 2026 did not happen in a vacuum. It is the direct, mathematically predictable result of a series of policy decisions, legislative shifts, and geographical oversights engineered between 2020 and 2024. To understand why luxury properties are bleeding value today, one must trace the timeline back to the era of emergency monetary stimulus. When the Federal Reserve slashed interest rates to near zero, it unleashed trillions of dollars of liquidity into the global financial system. Yield-starved capital sought refuge in tangible assets, triggering an unprecedented residential acquisition race. High-net-worth individuals, institutional hedge funds, and newly wealthy tech professionals competed for limited luxury inventory, bidding prices up to levels completely detached from local economic fundamentals. However, this buying frenzy ignored a series of structural traps built into the geography and laws of these destination markets. The first of these is the fiscal mirage of the tax-free state. In Austin, Texas, coastal transplants migrated en masse to escape California and New York income taxes. What they failed to calculate was how Texas funds its local municipal budgets. Lacking a state income tax, Texas relies heavily on ad valorem property taxes, assessed annually based on market value. Between 2021 and 2024, local appraisal districts aggressively adjusted property valuations upward to reflect the pandemic-era peak. When the market cooled, homeowners were left with annual tax bills that had surged by 40% in 36 months. In many upscale Travis County developments, property taxes now exceed 3% of the home's total value annually. For a $3 million estate, this equates to a $90,000 annual carrying cost before accounting for debt service, maintenance, or utilities. The perceived tax savings of moving to Texas were completely dismantled by the reality of the local tax appraisal system, a parallel structural trap developed in Idaho. Boise became the absolute epicenter of the remote work migration, with out-of-state buyers driving residential prices up by over 70% in a 2-year window. The geographical trap here was economic isolation. The local economy in southwestern Idaho is dominated by agriculture, manufacturing, and lower-wage service industries. The median household income in Boise could not organically support million-dollar valuations. When major corporate employers in Silicon Valley and Seattle instituted mandatory return-to-office policies in 2024 and 2025, the artificial demand vanished overnight. Remote workers who bought luxury mountain estates with adjustable-rate mortgages suddenly found themselves forced to sell. However, because local wages had stagnated, the domestic buyer pool was completely non-existent. Over-leveraged sellers were forced into a race to the bottom, cutting prices by hundreds of thousands of dollars to attract the few remaining cash buyers. In Florida, the crisis is legislative and physical. Following the tragic collapse of the Champlain Towers South in Surfside in 2021, the Florida legislature passed Senate Bill 4D. This landmark legislation completely rewrote the safety and financial regulations governing condominium associations. The law mandated that by December 31, 2024, all buildings over 3 stories tall must undergo comprehensive structural integrity reserve studies. More importantly, it eliminated the ability of homeowner associations to waive the funding of their capital reserves. For decades, luxury condo boards had kept monthly dues artificially low by deferring maintenance. Under the new law, these associations were legally forced to immediately fund millions of dollars in structural reserves for roof replacements, electrical overhauls, and concrete restoration. In 2025 and 2026, this resulted in massive 6-figure special assessments levied against individual unit owners. Many retirees and secondary homeowners in luxury coastal towers in Miami and Naples could not afford these sudden financial demands, resulting in a massive wave of panic listings that completely flooded the market and crashed prices. Simultaneously, the physical geography of the Sun Belt has triggered an environmental and insurance reckoning. In Phoenix, Arizona, decades of rapid suburban expansion came to a halt when the Arizona Department of Water Resources determined that the region's groundwater basins could not support previously projected development pipelines. The state began restricting approvals for new residential subdivisions that relied solely on groundwater. This regulatory shift instantly cast a shadow of doubt over the long-term viability of luxury developments in peripheral desert communities. Buyers quickly realized that a multi-million-dollar estate in an arid basin without secured municipal water access is a highly speculative, depreciating asset. In California, the legislative trap came in the form of direct taxation. In April 2023, the city of Los Angeles implemented Measure ULA, commonly referred to as the mansion tax. This policy enacted a 4% transfer tax on real estate transactions exceeding $5 million and a 5.5% tax on transactions exceeding $10 million. Critically, this tax is levied on the total sales price, not the seller's profit. A homeowner selling a $10 million property at a loss is still legally required to pay $550,000 in taxes at closing. The immediate result was a total freeze in high-end transaction volume. Capital flight accelerated as developers halted new luxury projects, and wealthy residents moved their portfolios to tax-neutral jurisdictions, leaving the existing supply of mega mansions completely stranded. The combination of these specific legislative, fiscal, and geographical forces has stripped the luxury market of its speculative premium, setting the stage for the historic unwinding of wealth currently unfolding across the nation. This is where the theoretical economics of the housing market collide head-on with brutal, day-to-day survival. The luxury real estate collapse of 2026 is no longer a slow-moving statistics report. It has degenerated into an active battleground. At the center of this battle is the total, catastrophic failure of the property insurance industry. In states like Florida and California, the private insurance market has effectively ceased to function. Major multinational carriers have quietly altered their risk models to account for a permanent state of climate volatility, rendering thousands of premium zip codes completely uninsurable. For the average homeowner, this is a crisis. For the owner of a $10 million coastal estate, it is an absolute death sentence. When a private carrier pulls out of a high-hazard zone, wealthy homeowners are forced onto state-backed insurers of last resort, such as Florida's Citizens Property Insurance Corporation or the California FAIR Plan. But these state-run programs were never engineered to absorb tens of billions of dollars in luxury liabilities. They are severely over-leveraged and constantly on the brink of insolvency. Consequently, they enforce strict coverage limits, often capping payouts at a fraction of a luxury home's actual rebuild cost. To secure full coverage, high-net-worth owners must turn to highly volatile, unregulated surplus line markets. In prestigious enclaves like Naples, Florida, and Malibu, California, annual property insurance premiums have skyrocketed from $12,000 to over $150,000 in a matter of 24 months. This creates an immediate, highly toxic drain on liquid capital. Sophisticated buyers are refusing to acquire properties where the mandatory annual carrying costs alone match the median household income of the surrounding county. This financial pressure has triggered an intense, bitter clash between wealthy property owners and state authorities. In Florida, affluent homeowners are actively lobbying for state-subsidized reinsurance programs, essentially demanding that middle-class taxpayers underwrite the risk of their beachfront infinity pools. Meanwhile, in California, the state insurance commissioner is locked in a fierce public battle with private insurers who refuse to return to the market unless they are permitted to raise rates without regulatory oversight. The result is a complete stalemate, and while the bureaucrats argue, the equity in these coastal homes continues to evaporate. Beyond the insurance crisis, a highly bizarre and deeply unsettling conflict is unfolding in urban luxury centers. In San Francisco, progressive local laws designed to protect vulnerable renters have been aggressively weaponized by highly sophisticated professional squatter syndicates targeting vacant, high-end properties. In an effort to address housing shortages, the city implemented a punitive residential vacancy tax, penalizing owners who leave residential units empty for more than 182 days in a calendar year. This policy has placed wealthy property owners in a catastrophic catch-22. If they leave their luxury townhomes vacant, they are hit with compounding, five-figure tax penalties. If they attempt to lease them out to offset these costs, they risk running into California's incredibly strict tenant protection laws. Professional squatters, well-versed in municipal tenancy codes, are renting luxury properties using falsified financial documents, paying the first month's rent, and then immediately stopping all payments. Due to extreme backlogs in the local housing courts, evicting these non-paying tenants can take upwards of 18 to 24 months. During this period, the owner is legally prohibited from shutting off utilities or changing the locks, effectively forcing them to fund the lavish lifestyle of an unauthorized occupant, while their property is slowly trashed from the inside out, simultaneously. The physical infrastructure supporting these luxury boomtowns is actively collapsing under the weight of rapid, unregulated expansion. In Austin, Texas, The local municipal utility networks were never built to handle the massive influx of energy-intensive 10,000 square foot smart homes that sprouted across the hills during the pandemic. During extreme weather events, the local electrical grids suffer severe localized blackouts, exposing the delicate vulnerabilities of these highly automated estates. The situation is further compounded by a massive wave of corporate restructuring. As the major tech conglomerates shed tens of thousands of middle management and highly compensated engineering roles, the tax base of these municipal districts is actively shrinking. Municipalities that issued hundreds of millions of dollars in municipal bonds to fund the expansion of luxury infrastructure are now facing severe budget deficits. They are responding by hiking local utility rates and municipal service fees, shifting the financial burden directly back onto the remaining wealthy residents. The ultimate dead end is represented by a quiet, bureaucratic shift occurring within coastal planning departments. Local zoning boards, under immense pressure to adapt to rising sea levels and geological instability, are aggressively redrawing their hazard setback lines. Properties that were purchased just 3 years ago as prime, buildable waterfront lots have been overnight reclassified as non-conforming high-risk zones. If an existing mansion in these zones suffers major damage, local regulations now prohibit the owner from rebuilding or even executing major structural repairs. The property is legally rendered obsolete. The owner is left holding a massive mortgage on a structure that is mathematically guaranteed to be reclaimed by the elements, with no legal avenue to protect their investment. This is the raw, unvarnished reality of the 2026 luxury real estate market. The superficial veneer of wealth has been stripped away, exposing a chaotic system of decaying infrastructure, predatory legal loopholes, and a total collapse of institutional support.